Ever since I can remember, I've been completely fascinated by wolves. I would have read books and watched Nat Geo shows about them all day long if I could have. Today, they remain one of the species I am most interested in. While I was in Montana, I was fortunate enough to speak on the phone with one of Washington State's Department of Fish and Wildlife wolf policymakers, Julia Smith. What follows is some of our conversation about Julia's background working with wolves, the up and downs of managing a keystone predator, and why she chose to transition from field work to policy making.
The main thing is if you want to work on large carnivores, it's not about the carnivores, it's about the people and policy stuff. So I no longer work in the field and don't work hands-on with wildlife, but I work on, oh goodness, anything that comes up with wolves, which is a lot. Things like writing rules about how we manage wolves, writing environmental impact documents around wolves, working with stakeholders is the biggest part of the job. Wolves are such a controversial topic that, it touches lots of different people in the agency. So I work with all of them. And then outside the agency, I work with anyone from a random member of the public to politicians, members of the legislature, head of the Cattlemen's Association. There's a lot of different polarized feelings about large carnivores on the landscape. It's 2021, but, there's a lot of places where you might think it's like 1930. And a big part of my job is speaking with people who don't agree with some aspect of what we're doing, whether those are people who love wolves or hate wolves, and just trying to listen to them, hear them out. And, I talk about bringing down the temperature in the room. People will come to me when they're just the height of, emotional anger, and I try to let them come down in my presence and so we can talk about the issues from a problem-solving mindset.
Nice. Yeah, because I was staying at a ranch out in Sheridan, Montana for the past 2 weeks. And it was kind of interesting to hear some of the ranch managers' ideas on things, because he's like a big wildlife person, but at the same time he runs a ranch. So it was and he had said something about there's supposed to be this policy regarding if a wolf or a bear or something attacks your livestock, if you can prove that it was that, they should get compensation, but half the time that doesn't happen because the magpies and the birds come down and destroy all the evidence. Do you know much about that?
Yeah, that's sort of the case everywhere where there's an argument. A classic argument is, people say, hey, well, why are ranchers so upset about, livestock depredation when cows are going to die anyway and they get paid for it and all this stuff. And there's many, many arguments about that, about, hey, you don't find, if there's evidence that if you know of one livestock depredation, there's 6 others that you haven't found. Oh, you have to, the evidence is so fast that, they can't do an investigation, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so that's a point of contention, and someone else might argue, hey, well, they should be out there monitoring their livestock more often and find a way to cover that up and protect those carcasses. How long has it been since they realize that something's dead? And then you go out on these big open allotment style grazing and realize, it's really hard to keep track of cattle daily in that landscape. So, it's kind of age-old battles around this type of stuff. And, it's not like one side is purely right and the other is purely wrong. There's points to be made on both sides. And, my job as somebody, as a wolf coordinator for the agency is to try to hear people out and try to listen to them.
How do you usually address negative attitudes?
I let people have whatever attitude they want to have. I am not going to change their mind. And I think that's something really important to know. A lot of us who come into the field because we love wildlife and love carnivores and all that kind of stuff, it is different when your livelihood is affected, they live in your backyard, that kind of thing. It's just a different attitude. People are allowed to have their personal opinions about this stuff, whether it is all the way one way to the point of, thinking wolves are like, angels that can never do any wrong, to, to devils, and why the heck did we reintroduce them and all that kind of stuff. I let people have those feelings. It is not for me to try to quote unquote educate or correct how they feel.
Yeah.
I think there's something about that. Many of these ranchers and folks have been on the landscape and working with the land for 100 years, and who is somebody to come and try to quote unquote educate them about something that they've known. That being said, you don't have to agree with what they say, and things that are just flat out wrong. I might pick and choose a time where I might say, I haven't seen that, I haven't heard that. That doesn't, that's not something I've experienced. Again, you don't have to agree, but people who are really set in their positions, but you're not going to change their mind. I really strive to just get people to listen to each other, to view each other as human, to view me as human, and see, hey, how can we actually try to move forward and problem solve together? What I'm working on right now is a post-recovery wolf conservation and management plan, meaning I'm working on basically an updated management plan for when wolves are no longer considered endangered in Washington. So right now, as you probably know, they were federally delisted across the lower 48 United States. So they're no longer federally listed, but they are still state endangered statewide in Washington. But our numbers of wolves keep going up, and that's great, and they're getting closer to recovery. There's going to be a point where the recovery plan that we have needs to be updated. So I started the process to, write a new wolf management plan, which starts with a big public comment period called scoping. And it's just basically wide open to the public. Hey, tell us what you think about X. I'm also working on other things like we have to do a rule right now around wolf livestock conflict, meaning that, some of our parameters around dealing with that are going to be in law. I want Washington to be seen as a success story for wolves and large carnivores. I don't work on other large carnivores within Washington, but I would like to see it as a place that approaches carnivore management with a sound, logical approach, not fueled by fire and frenzy, media hype, and all that kind of stuff. I want it to be scientifically based. I want it to be a place where Washington is proud to have healthy populations of large carnivores, doesn't, overblow any one side, and for it to be a place where people respect each other regardless of what side they're on. They're able to work together to move forward. And some days are great working toward thinking about that goal, and some days are not great. Some days, again, I feel like we're back in the 1930s and it's, kill anything that's a carnivore. This is definitely not a sprint kind of field. Unfortunately, the wildlife management field is, if you're really truly looking to make change, it's a centimeter by centimeter thing, not leaps and bounds. It's all about social acceptance of wolves. It's all about, where do people allow wolves to live? How many can we have in Washington?
Yeah, it's like a social carrying capacity, not a biological.
Exactly, yes. And I wouldn't even want to say a number like, 800 wolves. Then people will take that as the benchmark and they'll never let it go.
Yeah, true.
People who hate wolves will say, if they ever got to 1,000, you'd have to kill off 200 wolves to get back to the 100. And then other people, if you projected 800 and it was wrong, they'd say the population is in danger of extinction and, all this kind of stuff. I mean, people just, it's not about science.
Do you have any favorite experiences, either before you were in the office or from the field?
Any interaction I've ever had with a wild animal is a wonderful, wonderful thing. I've been lucky to, interacted with lots of wild animals because of volunteering on other people's projects when I was in grad school, all the way through wolf beds. They're very hard to find. And we did some work in Arizona and New Mexico called cross fostering. So we were putting wolf pups from captivity into wild wolf dens. And so that was always incredibly rewarding. Some really, really tough days in the field, but really rewarding. I love hiking in on wolf kills. We were doing a predation study in Arizona and New Mexico for a while, looking at what did wolves, kill, and what was the kill rate and all that kind of stuff. Walking into these places that wolves have been and seeing, what did they kill? How do they kill it? What do they eat? Whereas just all that stuff is so cool. I think I just like the mystery and kind of the soap opera-ness of following wild animals around and seeing what they're doing and who they're pairing up with and all that. And, if it were just that kind of stuff, I probably would have stayed in the field. But, it's also killing wolves for eating livestock. It's also, doing things you may not necessarily agree with totally. It's things that, I've killed wolves. I've put them in captivity for the rest of their lives for eating cattle. I've trapped and removed wolves from properties. I mean, there's a whole other side to these things that is, it's tough, and I think some people just say, yeah, it's part of the job and all that, and it is, but I think in this field of wildlife, we have to think hard about what we're doing and why we're doing it, and does that really align with our values? And it doesn't always have to align, but it's where's the balance, and if the balance tips too far, you got to reevaluate where you're at.
Do you have any standout quote unquote wild or crazy experiences?
Oh wow! I mean, oh my gosh. Let's see. There was one time I was trying to capture a wolf from a helicopter, and that to begin with is a wild and crazy experience. Even if everything goes perfect, it's you're flying at tree level, fast through a canyon. It's the most dangerous kind of wildlife work. That's how most biologists die, is in low-level aircraft. So that to start with is already there. But there was this breeding male of a pack that we were targeting for removal to remove him to captivity because of livestock depredation. We're chasing down this breeding male, and I could pick him out from the whole pack. I knew that pack very well. I'd been following them around for a long time, and just because you dart a wolf doesn't mean you go down right away. And so this wolf, we darted it, and it ran to this little rock crevice, and so they let me out of the helicopter, and I went up to this little rock crevice to check if he was immobilized or if he was still awake. I went to this crevice, and I'm feet away from this wolf, and he's looks me in the eyes and then scoots past me, and he brushed my leg as he went. He's boom, and just darts out of
wow.
there and runs full tilt away. And he had 400 cc's of Tilazol on him at that time. It didn't matter, he was not drugged, and he went. I had to scramble back to the helicopter and dart him again, and we did get him, it's tough. We accomplished our mission that day, but our mission was putting a wolf in a cage for the rest of its life. The work isn't always pure and good, and I think it's going to be that way with any sort of wildlife work. Wildlife are something that belong to everyone. They belong to the public. They belong to all stakeholders, and everybody, has a say or should have a say in what happens to them. And that means there's a lot of fighting. It's the same as any political stage that we have in the country, and it's just as polarized.
Wow, that experience sounds super awesome. I'm glad I asked that question. What is one thing in particular you wish people knew about wolves?
I just wish people knew they're just wildlife. They're just they are as cool and as normal and as just an animal doing their thing as any other critter. I don't think there's anything more spiritual about them, more special about them. In the same way, there's nothing more evil or bad about them. They're just an animal expand our population, as we expand our range, it's our job to make sure these animals have places to live. It's our job to make sure that animals don't blink out, and I think that's like the coolest thing about wolves is we worked so hard to get them gone, and we almost succeeded. We worked really, really hard at it, and they're back. And cougars and bears, didn't have as tough of a time as wolves because they weren't totally eliminated, but they're coming back too. And so large carnivores can be a success story if we, if government agencies manage these animals appropriately, they can come back. They can live in close proximity with people and cause relatively few problems. I really believe that. But yeah, I think that's it.
Awesome. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for talking with me.
Sure, yeah. Enjoy your travels. Have fun.
Shortly after my conversation with Julia, Idaho and Montana made the decision to remove protections on wolves. Idaho's policies would allow hunters to remove up to 90% of their wolf population, a move which has incited an uproar from wildlife advocates everywhere. Montana hunters would be allowed to take up to 10 wolves each, and a bounty program was enacted to reimburse them for their efforts. In Idaho, private contractors were allowed to kill as many wolves as they wanted to, with this happening all year long on private lands. In addition, a slew of inhumane practices have cropped up, such as chasing down and even running over wolves with all-terrain vehicles, tracking them with dogs, and hunting at night with the aid of lights and bait. Unfortunately, this is just one example of wolves being let down by misinformed governments. The removal of gray wolf protections has the potential to undo all the hard work that has been done by wildlife professionals for decades. A huge disappointment which Julia herself has encountered at other times in her career. Fortunately, due to a great number of people coming together in defense of wolves, the Biden administration has issued a status review on gray wolves. Hopefully, this will lead to stricter regulations being placed on their hunting and trapping once again. However, this is not a quick process, and wolves continue facing a great threat until a decision is made. It would be a tragedy if they were to be nearly eliminated by humans for a second time after so much work has gone into their recovery in the U.S. So, keep your eyes and ears peeled for any news about wolves and contribute to campaigns to protect them however you can. The wolves will thank you for it.